Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you, Kathy. Perfect.
Just double checking. I'm actually in the Tenafly conference room today. So trying something where I'm hybrid in case anybody comes in person. So we want to, as we go forward, we're going to try and do hybrid as much as possible so that we have the benefit of those that want to be in person versus those that want to be on Zoom. So thanks for bearing with us. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We are going to be talking about pricing today, pricing strategies. Some of you may have been on with this conversation with me before. And, you know, so you may or may not be hearing a few things that you've heard before, but I think that it's, you know, it's good to always hear it multiple times as you formulating your point of view. Are you guys seeing my screen?
I can see
Yes,
it.
we can hear Kathy.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the voice telling me. Just so you know, when I have the screen up, I don't always get to see everybody. So appreciate the voice. So as we go through this, I want to talk about pricing strategies first, and then we're going to get into an approach to building a CMA. Okay, is everyone good with that?
Yep.
And you're seeing this because you're seeing where this says career builders. This session we run obviously on a Monday for our coaching 1.0 agents, but we also run it for career builders for our evening session. It's an important topic that we want to make sure we get covered with everyone. So I'm going to go to a slideshow. And so let's talk about pricing our home. And I like to start with this little cartoon because has anybody had conversations with whether it's friends, neighbors, potential clients, even for yourself when you think about the home that you live in? Yes, I know what the comps say, but my house is special. Don't we all feel like that? And obviously in this market, what is the media telling us? What is the market telling us? We're in a seller's market. So prices, homes can be pretty special, whether the value is there or not. And, you know, what we're going to talk about together is as you price a home, working with clients, you want to think about it. If you're working with a seller, you also want to think about it if you're providing comparative and pricing advice for an offer. Okay. So what does it say on the screen? It says the market determines value, right? So as a seller, we may think, as an agent, we may think, but it's the market and the activity in the market that's really telling us what the true value is. How do we know that? What do you guys think? How do we know when the market is speaking to us? Come on, guys, I'd love to make this a little interactive.
What was the question again?
So how do we know how the market is determining value? What type of feedback are we getting to know? Where are we looking to see what's happening with pricing? What are we doing as we're interacting with people? What are we hearing?
Inventory is low.
Inventory is low, but we're talking about pricing. So if we're looking at our statistics.
Well, that determines pricing, right?
Well, that does have an impact to pricing. That is correct. It's correct. But if we're looking at our MLS every day, then we're seeing how houses are coming in, right? As far as the prices, whether they're coming in at list price, whether they're coming in under list price.
Everything is selling over listing price.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So the market is telling us we may have a point of view, our seller may have a point of view, our buyer may have a point of view. We want to go to the videotape, we want to go to the facts, right? The other way we know things are coming in are let's say we have a listing, we're going to see the type of offers we're getting. That's going to be telling us what the market is willing to pay for this home. So the value of property is determined by what a buyer is willing to pay, the seller is willing to accept into today's market. And then this third bullet point, right? The appraisal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
And buyers are making their pricing decisions based on comparing your property to other properties sold in the area and the days on market. So when you think about offers coming in, if you have a listing, that's what they're doing. They're doing the research. If you were listing a home for a seller, aren't you doing the same thing as when you're preparing a CMA for a client to list their home? You're looking on MLS, you're seeing what's happening in the area. You're seeing how long homes are on the market to sell. You're developing a point of view statistically on what your pricing is. Excuse me. So this next slide, has anybody seen this pyramid before?
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite charts that I use when I do a listing presentation. And so it's a very good illustration. A lot of us are, you need to learn how to speak to a client about pricing, but a lot of us are visual, right? So I know for myself, when I have a visual along with my words, it reinforces what I'm saying. And as consultants, we're guiding our clients, again, whether this is a buyer or a seller, we're guiding them for them to understand and come to terms with what the right pricing strategy is. Okay, so what this pyramid or triangle represents is really what is considered a three-pronged pricing strategy. All right, so if we look at the top of the pyramid, what is it telling us, that point? Do you guys see what it's saying? If the asking price is 15% above, what type of traffic are we going to get from our buyers or potential clients coming in to look at the property?
Less minimal, yeah.
Yeah, so you're at the high range, right? So when we think about that at the high range, we got to think about, well, what does that mean? Is this a market that's a fast market where there's very little inventory? Do sellers really have, if their motivation is high, they want to move quickly, do they have the luxury of overpricing their home?
Not if they want to move quickly, no.
Not if they want to move quickly, right? Right. And if they want to get, if their motivation is high, so when you're talking about pricing, right, we first need to understand motivation. What is our seller? Are they ready to move? There's an emotional experience that a seller goes through. There's an emotional experience a buyer goes through. Are they ready to move? And then how quickly do they want to move? And that will tie in and be a trigger to pricing. So at that high price point, when we have a lot of inventory or the seller may have a lot of time, they may test a price. This is really not a market to test price. If you want to move quickly, you want to be competitive, you want to get the most for your money, this would not be this typical strategy that I would go with. All right, so just hold that thought for a moment. We're going to come back to this to tie all the pieces together. Now in the middle, where it says market value and kind of where that red band is, and even, a little bit going into the light gray. Now, what's happening in terms of the exposure when you're in market value? What are we seeing that in terms of what's the potential buyers willing to look at property?
A lot more.
Right? Yeah, so I think it says 60%, right, on it. So now you've increased your chances. Now here becomes a part of the conversation, right, is when we price competitively, here's the question for your client. Do they want to be ahead of the line? Do they want to be behind the line? Do we want to be in the middle of the pack? When you're looking at the market and sharing with them what's happening in the market, if there's a lot of actives, let's say their house is, they're thinking around 600,000. If there are a lot of houses on the market, how do they stand out compared to those homes? And again, how quickly do they want to move that house? What do people do when you look at a house? What are you thinking about when you're going in to look at a house? How do people look at the value of the money that they're going to spend? What are they looking for?
Value.
They're looking at value, and value equates to what? How much? So you think about if you're buying a car, right? Let's use that script. If I'm buying a car and one car has fancy wheels and has fancy stereo system, and has a one of those, whatever they're called, the roofs, and it's $20,000. I know that's a really dated price, but let's just say $20,000. And then there's another car for $20,000 and it doesn't have any of those features. Which one do you want to buy? The one that has a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So all the ones that have bells and whistles that have all the features, that's the same thing with a house, right? How much are you getting for your money? So, and if there's a lot of competition, when we sell a house, we sell it multiple times, right? Because we have to sell it to realtors, right? We're looking for other realtors to come in to sell our property if we're listing that home, right? We're looking for buyers, and there could be pre-approved buyers and there could be people that are just looking. We're looking to sell multiple times. So we want to make sure that an agent isn't coming in with a buyer and saying, hey, let's look at this house, but you know what? I can take you down the street for the same price. I can get you a newer kitchen. I can get you a newer roof. Is that making sense?
Yes.
So
Yep.
so are you seeing how it's taking the numbers, but it's bringing some context and texture to it for your seller and even your buyer, right? If you're on the buying side and helping them to put an offer together, what are they getting for their money? So when you're at the market value, you're in the market, but the question is, are you standing out? And we have a fiduciary responsibility, right, to our sellers and our buyers. If I'm representing a seller, I want them to get the most money for their home, right? So I want to help them position and make a decision that's good for them. If I'm representing a buyer and I'm putting an offer in, I want to get the most home for their money. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So now we go to the lower part. This is the widest base of the pyramid. And now what we're saying is we're slightly below market value. What is happening now in terms of the type of exposure you're going to get? So you're giving yourself the widest net, right? You're giving yourself the widest exposure. So in this type of scenario, and it could be slightly, I know this is using 10% below, 15% below. That is not a hard and fast rule. That is a conversation with your client. But what this has is you can't guarantee that it's going to create a multiple offer situation, but you're putting yourself in the best situation to create a multiple offer situation. Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it does.
Any questions with what? So as you're preparing, as you're sitting down with a client and talking about pricing, helping them to understand it, can you guys see how this might be a good slide to be part of your listing presentation?
Yes.
Definitely.
And to help you, and even for you to think about when you're looking at the what's happening in the area, for you to get a handle on what's going on, right?
Now,
Yes, we have a question here, so bear with us. Go ahead.
in today's market, with people going over asking price because there's so little inventory.
Yes.
So how does that fit in with this?
Well, it's a great
Pyramid.
question. It's a great question. And I think that it still holds true no matter what the market is. Again, you're tying into, if you understand their motivation up front, what they're trying to accomplish, and every single home is unique. So we hear a lot of things, blanket statements, right? We look at the media and the media is telling us how things are going over asking, right? We look at a top number in MLS and it looks like everything is going over asking. If we were to look at the top statistics, we're looking at last year, it will range from anywhere from 12% to 20% over asking, right? And now they're predicting, originally they were predicting this year that pricing would go only about 6%. Now I'm hearing that it's back to double digits. But that is a 20,000 foot aerial view of the market, right? Not every house is treated equally. And there are homes that are going under list price, okay?
Oh, okay.
So what you have to do is, that's why you got to peel back that onion, and you really have to know your facts. You really have to be looking at MLS to see what's going on. Because when a client looks at Zillow, right? Let's use Zillow as an example. I met with a client where they looked at Zillow, and in their example, Zillow was actually undervaluing their home, right? But Zillow is making assumptions. So they have an algorithm and they're making assumptions. No one has gone in to look at that home. They don't know if they make the assumption that homes are on par, that things are in livable condition, that they are up to date, if you will. Not newly renovated, but let's say up to date, right? So that's a very big assumption, right? When things are done, very well, that could raise the price. If things need a lot of work, that's going to lower the price. So that's why, and when you see iBuyer went bust last year, because statistics alone can't tell the story. We then come in and we see. So we never want to overpromise that they can get something over asking. Okay. So you really need to get down to the devil, if they say, are in the details, understanding that detail, because every situation is. So you never want to promise they can absolutely get over asking. What you're doing is helping them decide which strategy is best for them to meet their goals. You're not telling them which strategy, you're providing, these are your options, and where do they feel most comfortable with. And if they want to price high, that's when you may decide that if that pricing high falls within a range you're recommending, have that price change conversation, right? So what happens when we don't see, let's say we go on market and we go at a price that's a little higher than we would have liked to have been at, but we agree, right, with the seller. And now it's 2 weeks and we've gotten only a couple of showings and we have no offers. What's it time for?
Reduce it.
To reduce it, right? Right. So that's a pricing conversation. So the time to have that pricing conversation is at the time you are agreeing to the list price, so that they understand that, hey, you know what, we can go with this price, but what I want to do is make sure we come back in a couple of weeks. We're going to watch the activity really closely. Right now in this market, you can see homes are going into attorney review and under contract within 2 weeks. If we're not seeing that type of activity with your home, we need to revisit this price. And you want to make sure that they're aligned with that. And even if they say yes at the listing presentation, and this is where there's a recommendation, get them to sign that paperwork that they will agree to a price change. I personally don't have them sign at the listing, but when I come back again, I come back as promised in 2 weeks and I say, it's time to have that conversation. And I show them the facts again so they can understand why I feel this way. And again, you tie it back to motivation, because if the price is too high, it's going to stay. What happens when a house is on days on market too long?
Less interest.
Less interest, right? And what happens? What are the other things that happen? What else are people starting to think about the house? If it's on,
People start questioning it.
they start questioning it. What's wrong with the house, right? There's probably nothing wrong with the house, but the days on market. And typically when you market a home, as fancy as we can get with our marketing, as much exposure, what percentage of marketing do you think is price? Throw out some guesses.
I would say, over 50%.
So we have over 50% in the room. Who else? We'll get a few.
30%?
Higher. You're getting cold. That's cold potato. Go higher.
Oh, 80.
80. That actually is the number that we've heard quoted. 80% is pricing. So of course, we're going to expose them to the most we can with the way we market and we approach. But if you price it right, then that alone is going to attract interest in the home. Okay, so this next slide, and again, this is a chart that I've used in my listing presentation, is pricing it right. It's a nice segue into this, right? Price it right to compete, be competitive. Pricing your home right the first time is key. And what happens is, what you want to be able to do is, we don't want that price to be overpriced and sit on the market. And length of market on the market can be a detriment. We're looking to generate offers within, this is a little dated, it says within the first 30 days on market to get you to the closing table. Quite frankly, in this market, if you're in the sweet spot of pricing, that 500, 600, 700, it's to within 2 weeks. It's within 2 weeks that you're already you've got the interest and you've got that offer out there and you're going into attorney review. And what this chart illustrates is where you look at this, the red dot. What happens is up in this corner, this is basically saying, because my price is high. So think about that pyramid. My price is high and my time on market is continuing to grow. So I am on the market. That's called being on the market. So yeah, you're out there, you're on MLS, you're marketing it, right? All right. When we go to the inside here, where the pricing is more reasonable, it's falling in that market value, that competitive pricing, it's perhaps even a little bit under market value. And the length of time on market is shorter. So just kind of, you can see me circling, hopefully, my arrow in this little quadrant over here. This is called being in the market. You're competitively in the market. What you want to be able to do is get your seller to meet their goals. You want to get them in the market, not just on the market. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So, we mentioned before features and benefits. This is just a chart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but these are all the different factors. And you have to think about the markets are different, even though this has been a strong seller's market. If you were to look at the history over the last year and a half, single family homes have been the hottest thing out there, right? And continue to be the hottest thing out there. Townhomes and condos, actually during the pandemic, what happened with that? Did people want to live in a building where you had to use an elevator, where you had to be in close proximity with people, maybe share a laundry? What was happening in those markets earlier in 2020 and even in the beginning of 2021?
They were looking to get out of that situation.
They were looking to get out. And if you looked out pricing, so here's the difference. If you looked at single family homes, pricing was going over asking. If you looked at townhomes and condos, a lot of times pricing was going under asking. All right. And then you had to level set. I had a client who had a really hard time because they heard what the market was doing and they had a condo and they just automatically thought they were going to get multiple bids over asking. So this is where there's always a little bit of, remember that first slide that was the cartoons that my house is special? Well, again, you're looking at very nicely well-maintained condo, did not have up-to-date kitchen appliances, did not have like the lighter color cabinets. It had a new countertop, it had a new sink, it had a new dishwasher. That wasn't enough for people to wanna, and we had to actually take price reductions. And that was an emotional, and had to really go through a very cathartic time with my seller for them to get to a place where they were comfortable. And so you have to understand that because part of our jobs are psychologists, right? You guys okay out there?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Is this helping so far? Does it make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Yes, it's very helpful, Kathy.
So now shall we start looking to build the CMA? Would you like to start looking at what that looks like?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right. So bear with me. I'm just going to take a drink of water and we're going to actually go over to New Jersey MLS. Now, one of the things that you can do in this market right now is you may not have a client right now, right? But you can still practice doing a CMA, right? And it's important to get used to doing it. And you can practice on multiple levels. One of the things that I recommend, Arlene recommends, we recommend collectively at KW, do a CMA on your own house. Actually pull up your house and go through the exercise to see if you were to put your house on the market, how would your house be priced? Okay, that's one way to do it.
I have.
You
I'm sorry.
have,
I
yes.
have. I have, but then I get stuck on. They leave a blank, and you're supposed to put the amount in, and I always wonder if I'm putting the correct amount in.
Well, that's a fair.
Like,
yeah.
that's where I freeze.
I freeze at the part where it's low inventory, especially in my town. and
Uh-huh.
it's so challenging comparing it. That's where I struggle. And I would love to hear a little more about,
Sure.
this market. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good question because you're right. The inventory is lower, and I can appreciate that, especially when you're doing a CMA for the first time. We're all nervous the first time we do a CMA. And honestly, even now, I'm 4 years in the business and I do CMAs. There are some times where they come out beautifully, and I understand the range that I'm very comfortable with, and I have great comps that help me really pinpoint where it should be. Now, one thing I'm going to say is we never tell our clients what price they should price the house at. Why do you think that is?
that's a very good question. I always wonder that. I never questioned it because I mean,
because it's your fault once it doesn't sell for that amount. You didn't do it right. It's you pushed them to price it at that amount. It wasn't their idea. If you give them the price range, they pick out the range that they want, then it becomes more of their idea of what number.
but aren't we the ones giving them a
We give them a
CMA?
suggestion. We give them a range of like, hey, this is what I think your house is about. I think your house would sell somewhere between 420 and 440. What number do you think? What number would you like to list it at? So this way, it's not a you thing; it's a them thing. It's not selling because you put the price.
I get that part, but as far as pricing goes, I mean, I know we give recommendations, so wouldn't we want to stay within that ballpark, even if they're like ridiculously
Highballing it?
highballing it?
Absolutely, we want to stay in that range that we gave them.
Yes. And quite frankly, if they're unrealistic about their pricing, you may decide that they're not the right client for you because you're not going to be able to help them. And that is a weird thing when you don't have clients. You might be like, oh my God, how could I walk away from somebody? But sometimes if they're not ready, then that price is not going to serve anybody well. So that was always a, part of the scripting when we go on a listing appointment is one of the things we say to a client is, so we're going to decide today whether you're going to work with me, whether I'm going to work with you. Either one is fine. And then the client says, well, why would you say that you wouldn't work with me? Well, sometimes a client asks that they want me to do marketing or they'd like to price a home that doesn't make sense in this current market. And I don't think I can do the best job for them. And so if that's the case, then, that's okay. But, we'll shake hands and part as friends, along those lines. Because the thing is that when you are meeting with a client, I want you to remember that they're interviewing you. You are also interviewing them. You want a client who's coachable. You want someone who wants to have a conversation. So what Layla was speaking about is as we come up with a CMA, we're not coming up with one number. We're coming up with a range. And that's why that we go back to that pyramid. That pyramid then illustrates the bandwidth of what would be at the high and what would be at the low. So and understanding, I want to go back to Zillow for a second. I always make sure I know what Zillow says because everybody looks at Zillow, right? And so when I do an interview with my client, we talk about pricing. The other part of the script when you're pre-qualifying them is you say to them, well, tell me about the price you're looking to get for your home. So you want to understand what's on their mind. And I had one client that actually undervalued their home. And then I had another client that really thought that they could get $50,000 more, but I didn't dispute it. I just listened to them. And I said, all right, well, let us go back. We're going to do some analysis. We're going to do our pricing and we'll come back and have a conversation. So I never discounted what they said and just leaned into what the facts were. And then I came back with the CMA that showed them the range. And where in the case of Zillow undervaluing, that was a very nice conversation to have with a client to say, well, we think Zillow undervalued your home. And we actually think that you can get between 575 and 630. That was the range we gave them. And then I showed them individual comps And my comps were able to show them where someone had priced at the high at 630 and had to take a price change. Okay, so there was danger being at 630 even in this market, because if the feature and benefits aren't there, there's some danger to that. The 575 certainly would cast a widest net, and that would have been like the under value of the market, but that was $25,000 more than Zillow had said. So they said to us, well, what do you think if we went in the middle? We said, we think that's a great idea. So they got where we wanted them to be, but we let them get there. Does that make sense? And we did it. I was with another agent for this particular listing. We did it by showing them the facts. So I'm going to dive into the facts. Cindy, you have a question.
Yeah. So I'm giving someone a free CMA later. I offered that as like a newer agent just to introduce myself. And a few people wrote back. I'm speaking to one later. And so I looked at the Zillow estimate. That was one of the first things I did. And it seems a little high for being in the middle of Hawthorne and what I looked at. So when I'm speaking to him, how do I go about this conversation? Like, what should I ask him what he believes his house is worth? And what if he has looked at Zillow, like estimate? I'm just not sure how to kind of start the conversation.
Sure. Well, I think that, I would talk to them. I think I would just ask questions. They're obviously interested in finding out what the value of their home is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what I would probably do is maybe start with them and say, listen, let me tell you a little bit what's going on in the market, and, talk to me. Then you can share with them a little bit about what's happening in the market, right? So you could use that customer summary page, which I'm going to show you guys in a minute. And you could say, like, let me just show you what's going on in terms of kind of, here's what's happening in Hawthorne right now. Here's what, like, the low range is this price. The high range is this price. Based on the CMA you did, you probably have a range of where you think the house sits in, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really gone through it. He hasn't even told me. So he reached out over Facebook. I kind of just Googled
Okay, so
his
you
address.
don't have an appointment yet? Is that you're working on it?
Yeah, we're speaking later on the phone, but he hasn't told me his address. I kind of just Googled it just so I know beforehand.
I would say, Cindy, that what you want to do then is, since you're going to talk later, I would get a little more texture from him.
Okay.
Person, and just find out, like, say, so thank you so much for reaching out, and I'm working on your numbers, and I have an initial range, that we can talk about, but I'm just curious. Tell me what's happening right now. Are you thinking about selling? Find out. Always go to motivation. What's going on in their life?
Okay.
And no matter what they say, it's good for you. Like, in other words, it's like, I just wanted to find out. Good for you. Good for you for keeping up with the value of your home. Right. And then you can say, well, let me share a little bit what's going out, because you're going to build a little rapport. You're going to say, hi, how are you? So happy to spend a little time with you. Let me ask you something. You talked about, you've asked me to do a CMA. Can I ask you, what's going on? Are you thinking about selling right now? What are your
He said that he's thinking about it, but they're yeah.
Okay, so you can use that. You can say, listen, you told me that you were thinking about selling. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in the market. And you're just going to give them facts. And I'm going to go to this customer summary sheet. And you can use that as your base. And you can say, so talk to me about, where do you think your home fits?
Okay.
And it's a dialogue. And then, like, just listen to what they have to say if they tell you, well, I think my house is 700,000, and maybe you think it's 600,000. Say, well, listen, let me show you comps. Let me show you, I've done it at a very high level without seeing your home. For me personally, I do a two-pronged approach when it comes to pricing. I go in with a point of view, but without physically seeing the home, what I have is a high level point of view. Until I actually see the condition of the home, that's when I can determine, in the size of the home, I can determine and either sharpen my pencil So sometimes what I'll say is, well, here's what I've initially come up with. We'll go through that. But now that we've seen your home, we'd like to go back and sharpen our pencils and let me come back to you. Because there may be factors that you're not aware of, either that's going to raise that price or lower that price.
Do you mention to them, Kathy, like we aren't an appraiser is in the beginning? This is just, a comparative, like how do you?
I would say I wouldn't worry about saying you're not an appraiser. You say, listen, this is an initial CMA without seeing your home. It just gives you an idea what's happening in the market and kind of a very, very high level idea of what's going on. But that's why you want to know like where they're thinking.
Okay.
And this is where if they're serious, like, part of what you want to do is be like, for me to really price your home well, it'd be great for me to be able to come and preview your home.
Got
And
it.
then you set up an official appointment. Does that help you?
Yes, that helps me a lot. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Good luck. But exactly what Cindy is doing, those become other options in terms of offer your friends or family a CMA. Use them. Like right now, I want to do a home appreciation. I have a couple of friends that have been in their homes for a while. I'm going to ask them if they would allow me to use them as guinea pigs. Because what I want to do is I want to run numbers, but I also need to practice how it's going to sound, right? And see how they respond. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when I do that. But it's, giving yourself a chance to develop a point of view is important. So, and that's,
Kathy,
yeah.
I have a question. I'm working with a buyer right now, and she basically asks me questions about are these homes priced right? Are these homes, like every time we go to see a house, she's very concerned, her and her husband. In those scenarios, what's the right kind of just approach? Because there's really no right and wrong right now at this point, right? Everyone's marking.
So yeah. So here's the thing: is you always go to the facts, right? They want to know our jobs are to interpret the market, not to make the market, right?
Okay.
So we're not just giving an opinion. What we're doing is we're sharing information based on the facts. So I want to go to NJMLS because I think some of these questions will get answered but I'll be honest with you, you got to put in the time to be able to do this work. If you want to develop a point of view, if you want to feel more confident as you're talking with your clients, the only way you're going to do that is rolling up your sleeves and getting into MLS and starting to practice to do these things. Because otherwise, you're not going to have facts to share with them of whether the house is priced well or not. I had a client, this was kind of funny, in 2020, and I showed them a condo. And they said, but the prices 4 years ago were half the price. And it was really hard for me not to laugh because it's like, 4 years ago means nothing. So of course I had to keep myself composed. And I just said, listen, that was a very different market. This is the market we're in. And you really have to decide if you really want to buy, this is the market that we're dealing with. These are the cards that have been dealt with us. So I understand a lot of the homes that we look at, we may say, my husband and I were looking at a condo at one point. In 2020, in January, it was $100,000 less than it was in July. So it was hard for me to know that had increased $100,000. In that case, that condo wasn't worth that extra $100,000. But things are perception. What money are you, when you put a dollar amount associated with something, when you buy a good piece of furniture, a good piece of jewelry, do you want to invest in a good piece of jewelry? Do you want to invest in a good, in an expensive car? Do you want to invest in something versus are you going and for you, you're okay with it being less expensive and it may not last as long, right? I'm not making any judgments, but those are just part of like perceived value, right? So I'd rather have a few pieces of good jewelry than a lot of costume jewelry. That's just me. Doesn't mean that somebody who loves costume jewelry, that they're wrong. It's just a different point of view. And then, of course, I wear them for 50 years. Anyway, I don't want to get too off track. Sorry, guys. But I just want to kind of illustrate. Hopefully, this is kind of making sense as you tie it into other things. So let's go to the screen. Okay, hold on one sec. Okay, good. All right, you guys should be seeing NJMLS.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Cool. All right. So what I am going to show you is, let's see, I think I have it as a save CMA. Sorry, I'm just logging back in again. I guess you guys can see that.
You
There
use the cloud
is,
CMA, correct?
actually, I don't use the cloud CMA. It certainly, there's nothing wrong with the cloud CMA. I used it at one point in time. I'm going to show you the approach that I take. And there's no right or wrong. This is just what you're comfortable with and coming up with what you feel is something that you can speak to. So I always start with thinking about looking at the market. And so when I look at, so I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to start with a property search, and I'm putting in TNAC because I'm going to use an example of a CMA that I did for my daughter. All right, so you see how it defaults to Bergen. Status is always defaults to active. I'm going to put it under contract. Sold in this market, I'm actually going to, because there's so little inventory, I'm actually going to do 6 months. But a lot of times I only use 3 months. If I'm working with a buyer, I typically use 3 months because this market is so fast. I want to see what's most current. So we can see here right now up here. So if I don't put any price or anything else, it's showing that there are the activity between active, under contract, and sold is 267. I'm going to narrow this. So between 400 and 5, actually between 450 and 550. They bought their house in 2020 for $480,000 in TNAC. And I was doing it in equity. I was helping them see an updated equity value because they were trying to get rid of their PMI. And if you have 20% or more equity, then your PMI goes away. So that I was working with the lender and working with them to come up with things. So right now, between 450 and 550, the activity is 98. I'm now going to, they actually have 3 bedrooms. So I put in 3 to 4 bedrooms. Baths are 1 to 2.1 because they actually have 2.1. All right. And also the other thing I always do is I look at everything. I look at it. I put everything on the same playing field because I use non-flood. I'll be honest with you. So when I'm looking at for a specific house, I want to see, because if there's a flood area right around the corner, that's going to be a different in pricing. So
I'm sorry, Kathy, how do you get the floodplain again?
So down here, see this arrow here, there's all this additional criteria. So when you're looking to fine tune things, I really encourage you all to explore this a little bit and try different things. And so I go into floodplain because also when I'm working with buyers, so let me go back to additional criteria if it wasn't there. If I put on floodplain, and let me just remove this. If I put in floodplain, what happens is, what comes up are all these choices. 100-year, 500-year, house in flood, lender may require insurance, none, partial. I do none. Okay.
What does that mean, none?
None meaning that it is not in a flood zone. It is not in a flood zone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there's no floods. It's not in a flood zone. And so then what that does, so now I have my basic criteria. Now, the other things that I'm just looking at market information right now. I'm not looking at yet what is the CMA piece of it, because the CMA, the other thing that I would most likely put in would be the style of the house. Okay. So this is going to run, and I just want to quickly show you, and I'm doing this because I want to be able to show you the customer summary report. It's my most favorite report. I use it for my listing presentations. I also use it when I'm helping a buyer decide on how to put an offer in, because everybody can see my screen, and I've got 3 actives coming up in this price range. I've got 19 under contract and 65 sold within the last 6 months. So that's telling me activity. Okay. I check all of them because I want to put them all in. So Cindy, this is a report that's a great report to use.
Okay.
Working with, and also I would encourage you, you might want to do a Zoom with the person so you can actually see them. So you're not just talking on the phone. That way, if you do decide to have an appointment in person, you're comfortable.
Got it. Thank you, Kathy.
And then you could also share your screen. And now you're just adding one other level of professionalism. So see how now what this is doing is it's giving me an average list price, and it's giving me an average days on market. But we can see here, we've got one that's only on for 4 days versus the other that have been sitting. So the ones that have been sitting, what does that tell us? They're probably overpriced, right? For the condition of the homes. So, and now we look at our under contract, and we have an average list of 498. We know we have a low of 459 and a high of 550. All right. And days on market are 17. So what is that telling me? If I have my average days of active are 112, but my average under contract, and if I look at this, the majority of them, what is it saying? Again, let's tie that back to price. What do we think?
Under contracts were priced adequately?
Adequately, yeah. Yeah, our assumption, this is an assumption, it's an educated assumption. Here's the numbers that are saying, hey, these must have been priced well, right? And you're seeing what you're getting. Notice the different prices. Now all of a sudden you're seeing what a 3-bedroom versus 2-bedroom versus 4-bedroom, et cetera. And then your solds. And your solds then are going to show you what the average list is at 491 compared to the average sold at 503. Okay. Average days on market 41. Now, this is giving you an average, right? So when you look at it, I mean, you know, the numbers are the numbers. They did get in an average sold of over asking, but they're not these huge numbers coming in. So again, you'd want to dig into the detail for it. But one of my favorite reports, and I find it really helpful when I want to share what's going on in the market with people, because if their house is going to sell, is going to be priced somewhere within that this 450 to 550. Right now, this is their competition. So that's part of how I describe it, right? Is actives, you want to consider competition, and you see whether they have any competition or not.
So under the CMA reports, what did you first select to get there?
So this I did as a property search.
Oh, the search. Okay.
So I started just as a property search. Okay.
Okay.
And the other way I like to look at this, another favorite, and I put this in my listing packet, is a map listing. And again, you're talking to someone, you're doing a Zoom. This is going to come up. And now I'm going to see where all these houses are in Teaneck. So now I can fine tune where I want to focus on for my CMA. And I can also then show the client, well, see, look at where these houses are located. Are they close to where your house is located? Because that's going to be the truest comp. That's going to be the truest comp when I'm closer in their small, tight area, right? So now I want to go to a CMA. So, but I would encourage you, these 2 reports can be extremely helpful. And these are great when you're showing a client what's happening in the market. They're a great 2-way because it also helps you pinpoint to them what's going on. And always remember, how are you? Always remember that your client is going to think that their neighborhood is extremely special, and it may be, but people from the outside don't know the town. So when somebody has a budget, let's say 500,000, they're looking at all the homes for 500,000. So that you have to also level set with your client to understand, you know what, I understand that, you know, you're used to living in this part of the town. People from the outside are looking at it in terms of this is all your competition. Whether you feel that that is, because everybody feels that one side of the street is better than the other side of the street, whatever. We can't play into that. We can just say, understand, we have to help them look through the eyes of the buyer. Okay, does that make sense, guys?
Mhm.
All right. All right, I'm going into a saved CMA. I know we are tight on time. It always goes faster. But this is a saved CNA. This is the house that I'm doing the CMA for to find out if it's increased its value. And you can create a CMA underneath MJMLS. You just go into the CMA reporting. And I want you to see, I'm going to go into add and remove comps because I want you to see how I built this. So you're doing a search. When you're doing a CMA, you're doing a search. And so this search, for CMA, I focused on solds. So that is my, these are the homes that I came up with. Actually, I want to step back a second. I missed a step. Forgive me. I'm going to go back to property search for a second because I want to show you. So you have the ability, once you've done a search, you can actually click on recent searches and it brings up the last search that I did. You see how that happened? I'm back to TNEC. Okay. Now I'm going to add in actually a map search here. So I'm going to do map search up front. So I'm clicking on map. And this is how up front you can fine tune the neighborhood. And I'm centering the map to the house that I'm doing the CMA for. Hopefully my map will come up. But let me close it again and come back. 87. It may be too many for this purposes. Let me see, 450, 350. I'm going to, just for the illustrate this, I'm going to do 3 months just because it seems to be too many houses. Map search. Okay, here we go. So the map comes up. Everybody see that? This green bubble is actually, this is the house. Actually, this is where we are right now. Forgive me. It actually comes up with where you are. Now I'm going to put it into TNEC. I'm going to submit. Oh, and I'm going to, my radius is going to be, I'm going to start with 1/2 mile. But you have the ability to draw a circle or draw a rectangle. All right, let me get this to, let me recenter it. So now I'm in TNEC, all right, see the bubble? This is where 988 is, over here, right? I'm going to draw a circle. That's a 1/2 mile. For me, I don't want to be on the other side of Route 4. I only want to be on this side of Route 4. So you can move that circle around. Okay, see what I'm doing? And then if I want to see what homes have come up, I'm going to submit my map criteria. And you see how now it gives me my geocode. It's basically like plotting on the map, that circle, that radius of 1/2 mile. And you can do a mile, you can do a 1/4 mile, you can decide, or you can draw a rectangle.
How do you determine what area as far as You know, how far you want to go. But if you did a half a mile, would you go a mile or 2 miles?
It depends upon what I do is I try to go closer in and see if I have enough information to work with.
Now you say enough, how many?
Number of houses. So in other words, enough houses that are
5
coming.
or-
Well, to do a CMA, you need at least 3 sold, at least. You know, when an appraiser is looking at putting numbers together, they're using at least 3 sold. So you want to, and so right now, because we're doing the last 3 months, it's only giving me a count of 4. So I could expand that. But at least what that's doing now is I'm narrowing in of what happened in that neighborhood. Okay. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah,
I find this to be very helpful in
That's
terms
really
of
specific too, Kathy, which makes it even more valuable, the information that you're giving them, right?
even more valuable. And they feel what you're doing is you're valuing them also.
Yeah.
You're honoring where their house is. And if the thing is that at least if you're starting there and say, you know what, there's really not a lot of activity, you could say, all right, we're going to go further out. But I always find that, again, remember earlier I was talking about that pyramid where it's a visual. So you're talking with somebody, but then you're also seeing a visual. The visual is reinforcing to them and they can see, because then they'll be like, oh, what about this street? What about that street, right? And now you're having a dialogue and a rapport, right? And we know that if we think about Teaneck, which is a nice sized town, you could have a house over closer to Hackensack River. You could have a house that's closer to Route 4. You know, in this example, the division for me was I didn't want to be on the other side of Route 4. I wanted to be in what is called in Teaneck, it happens to be called the Country Club area. It's one of the neighborhoods, you know. And what happens is as you learn about where you're doing business, you're learning those pieces of information. So you want to go to school, if you will, on understanding it so you know the most. So this is giving me an example of that. When I do a CMA, and I know we're just at 12 o'clock, do you guys have like 10 more minutes? Is that okay? You guys online okay for like 10 more minutes?
is this being recorded and going to be posted, Kathy? Because I have
It is
to go.
it is being recorded. It is
Okay,
being recorded.
it's going to be posted on the KW YouTube or? do we
Yes,
know?
we will post it. I think it gets posted on the coaching lobby
On the
site, and also I'll check with Jason. He'll
Thank
tell us. Okay.
Thank you.
So going back into the CMA that I ran for them, there is a very cool report within NJMLS called the CMA report. So this is a choice, just no differently than you run a full report or run a customer brief summary report or that customer brief tax report. This is a CMA report. So this is not a cloud CMA. You can do a cloud CMA, nothing wrong with that. That's very pretty to look at. I use this as my worksheet.
Did you present that to your client?
This particular page, I do not present to my client. I use it for my background. What's that?
How did you get there?
So this particular report,
Mhm.
when you're doing a property search, so let me go back a second. I just want to show you how you can get there from a search.
Thank you.
And I'm going to just, so let's do this. It's a little slow.
Mm.
Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to click on everything. See where it says full report?
Mhm.
Again, I really encourage you all, take a look at all these different reports you can get. And what I'm choosing is the CMA report. And what I like about this report is it allows me to do the adjustments. I can adjust comps. So let me see. Sorry, I don't have that MLS number. Excuse me. Let me see if I can get, let me go back here so you can see. Turn to search results.
So you would go to a specific property, or do you need the MLS?
Well, part of it is you're putting in a specific, you always want a subject property.
Mhm.
So let me just see if I can do it this way. Hold on, guys. Sorry. Whoops, wrong thing. Let me see if I can pull in the subject property. Oh, let me see. There we go. Here's their house. Okay, so now their information fills in, and I can go to adjustments.
This is another area I got stuck in. How do you determine what's worth what?
Well, so now here, so
Each
this
bedroom,
is,
each.
yeah, so what happens is there's actually a chart. There's a chart that if you're going to use this. Now, this is a second level of detail when you're doing a CMA. I've done some CMAs where I've just used that customer summary report. There's enough information there. There's a house around the corner that is identical. A lot of times these older neighborhoods, the houses were built by the same builder. They're within the same time period. There's enough in there to do an initial price for them. When I work with a buyer, I typically don't go to this level of detail. I'm looking at that customer summary report. I'm picking up a few comps and I'm saying, let's look at this comp together. I'm looking at specific homes to get an idea. This is a whole nother level that I do to fine tune and every season I go on the Jeff Otto, who is an appraiser. He does it costs money. I think $75 to $90 to go on his webinar. And he takes you through what's happening in the market for New Jersey, but he also gives you this CMA adjustment guide. So you know how to do plus and minuses. But the idea here is it's showing you your subject property. So I know how many bedrooms, how many baths, and then I'm comparing it to the other properties, right? And then there's pluses and minuses that would go in here. So if I go to my saved CMA, you're going to see those numbers plugged in, and there's charts, and it says for a house that's valued at 250, here's the type of number you're going to use for plus or minus. If my house is around 400, here's the plus or minus dollar amount. If it's 750,
And the charts are in here?
I have a chart. The chart is not here. Again, it's a chart that is you're supposed to get by going to his class.
Okay.
So let's see if the numbers come through. Why do my numbers not come through? Should be coming through from a saved one. Sorry, guys. I don't know why the numbers aren't coming up. I had a saved one before. Not cooperating.
Well, in any event, at this point, we can't use this without the chart.
So the idea here is well, because you came to my class, I may be able to share that chart.
Oh, that'd be great.
So I'm sorry, I don't know why it's not coming up. Adjustments in here. The premise of the way that this adjustment works is that if you think about your subject property, so your subject property has 3 bedrooms, right? And you have a comp you're bringing in, and let's say the comp has 4 bedrooms. It's right across the street. It just sold within the last 3 to 6 months, but it has 4 bedrooms. So you have to true up the numbers. Your subject property has 3 bedrooms. You have to minus out that 1 bedroom, right? And that gets factored in on square footage. If your subject property has one bathroom and your comparison has 1.5 bedrooms, you have to minus out that, right? So it's a plus or minus. If the subject property has something that the comparative doesn't, right? You're going to add it into so the subject property has 3 bedrooms, comparative has 2 bedrooms, you have to add it into the comparative. If the comparative has more than your subject property, you got to minus it to bring it down to what your comparative is. You guys, does that make sense? So that, yeah.
But how do you adjust the price for the 1 bedroom, less 1 bedroom?
And that's where, so that
comparison.
this comparison, this CMA report, and I don't even know why it's not even coming up now, so I'm sorry. It's being very uncooperative. What it's doing is you're adding pluses and minuses, and then it comes up with an idea of what the pricing will be. Okay, for some reason, my pluses and minuses went away, but I had pluses and minuses in the different ones. Down here, you can see this one listed for 500, 530, 499. It's showing what it sold for. And then when you're doing your pluses and minuses, it's actually going to come up with an adjusted price for you.
Oh, okay.
And then what it does is it'll give you an average. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the concept of it. Does that
Kathy, I
make
have a
sense?
question.
Yes.
As far as your adjusted price ranges, what do you think is too big of a range? You want to stay under 50K between your ranges? Is there a method to that?
Well, I would say is that, yeah, there is a method. The tighter the band, the better.
Yeah.
Okay. So but it will depend upon, it depends upon what's going on. I don't go more than 50,000 typically. Okay. Ideally, even like a range of like 25 is better. But again, it depends upon what's going on in the area on it. The other thing that you like to factor in is the style of house. You know, what a ranch is going to get is going to be different than a center like a colonial or a Cape Cod. All right. So again, I typically will bring in the style of house also.
Yeah, as long as there's enough comps for it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And when you don't have enough comps, what you're doing is there's 2 ways to look at that. And the comps are looking at it from like starting really narrow, what's in the neighborhood, to going further out, right? Either as a rectangle or as a radius, a circle. And also, so you want to look at that, and also how many months you're showing. If there's not a lot of activity in that town, you may have to go further out to get an idea of what's going on it.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, this is where it comes back to, you know, that customer summary report and what's happening in the market. So you're basing your comps mostly on solds. You may bring in some under contract and active as points of reference. Again, remember, let's put the bow on it. I'm going back to kind of, here's the range we see your house in. What are you thinking about this? Mm-hmm. Okay. Actives, what's happening in the market? Are there a lot of homes in that price range? Now let's look at the specific. You always want to come down to, we're going to actually go online and look at these specific houses together, right? If they don't believe you, which is possible because they just really are not ready. I've said to clients, would you like me to bring you to those homes that are active so you can see them compared to? Because if they say, well, I think that's a good comp, and there's no way it is because they have a new kitchen. I had a client who said, oh, we just did our kitchen. Turned out they had done their kitchen 20 years ago. But for them, it was a new kitchen. Because it was a fine kitchen. It was a saleable kitchen. It was a clean kitchen, but it was 20 years old. So you forget when you live in your house. You know, my kitchen is 10 years old. For some people, that's already dated. It's not white cabinets. Some people are going to love it. Other people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe how dated this is. You know, so sometimes you can say to them,
So Kathy, I'm sorry, I have to go now, but I appreciate the class. It was,
you're welcome.
Very informative.
I know we ran late. I'm sorry, guys. I hope it was helpful.
No, that's okay. Yep. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good luck. So you can also offer to take them to actually see when you're trying to price a home. Is you can say, let's go look at these and see what you think of them. And again, that's obviously time factor.
Right. It's turning out, I'm realizing that having the actives on hand is really important because you're showing them their direct competition at this moment, right?
Exactly.
So
Same
you're
thing.
either going to help to sell those homes or you're going to be in competition with those homes, right?
Keisha, exactly. And that's where also understanding under contract too. Again, let's see. So you're always armed with, here's within the comps that you're pulling in, because I may bring in 4 comps, but there's really 1 or 2 that truly are most like their house. And then I'll say to them, let's look at this. What do you think? Do you agree this is a good comp? And they're like, oh yeah, that's a good comp. Like, that's what you want them to say, like, yeah. Because now all of a sudden they're like, oh, and not only is that 475, oh, then they may have to, the person that I did a listing on where they thought their house could sell for 650,000. I showed them what a house with 650,000 went for in our town listed. It had a new kitchen. They did not have a new kitchen. So when we came up with our pricing was more in 550 to 599. That's a little bit of an ego blow. So you have to be very delicate about that. They decided to go with the 599. I personally would have chosen 575, but they were adamant about 599. It was within our range. It was high on the range, but it was in our range. So we're like, if that's what you'd like to do, then that's what we can do. Now, here's where what they didn't get was that high of that we got multiple offers. We had, I think, 6 offers, but some of them came in at list because of the condition of the home. Some of them came in at list. Some of them came in at $10,000 or $15,000 over. I think we ended up with an offer that came in at like $16,000 or $17,000 over. They did not get that $50,000 over that they were thinking that the media has been telling them about. Okay, so it actually kind of reinforced that 575 or 585 might have been good because they would have felt like they got more money. But my job wasn't to say I told you so. My job was to
Something else.
we were still getting them the most money, right? So remember what I said, as when we're working with sellers, we want to get them the most money for their home. When we're working with buyers, we want to get them the most home for their money, right? That's how you want them to feel. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
All right. Thank you guys for your time. It's 12:15. You've been so gracious to stay with me all this time. I hope it was helpful.
Definitely was. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
You're welcome. Pleasure spending time with all of you.
Kathy, is there a way we could get your presentation, like a copy of it? I mean, I feel like there's really
Yes, Marco. Yes, I can share that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, guys, you have a great
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Nikki.
Bye, Layla.
I'm gonna call you, Nikki. I need to practice.
Okay.
Bye.